Welcome back to the show. And this evening we're going to be talking with Mark Bertolini, of is currently has a Zoop um, campaign running. So let's bring him in, find out about him and the campaign. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad, Chad. How you doing?
Busy.
I hear that.
So before we start talking about Breakneck, let's tell me a little about yourself as a comic book reader and as a creator.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing comic books now professionally. I mean, getting stuff published for, I think it was, 2010, I think was my first real published work. I've done a lot of short stories. I've done a lot of miniseries for a bunch of different publishers. And outside of that, I'm a dad to 4 teenage boys. So there's a reason why there's nothing up here, and this is really gray. But
Yeah.
is that?
I said, yeah, and I understand. I have one, so.
Oh, okay.
So, do you remember maybe the first comic book that you read, or the one that got you interested in wanting to make your own?
The first comic I was very big into G.I. Joe comics when I was a kid. That original Larry Hama run was I loved the cartoon, and then when I saw the comic on the rack at the grocery store, I begged my mom to buy it. I mean, I don't know if you can see here. So there's get that around the right way. So I've loved G.I. Joe all my life. So that was really the first comic book I remember reading is G.I. Joe. But I didn't really think about making my own comics until it was actually Youngblood #1 when Image first came out. And I went and picked that up, and I thought, hey, this guy just made all his own superheroes. I think I can probably do that.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Breakneck.
So Breakneck was actually it was the first thing that I ever had published, and Breakneck is basically the story of the world's crappiest supervillain, and he's left alone in a world full of heroes. So the heroes got together and massacred all the villains, and he got left, alone because nobody really knew who he was. He wasn't a very high profile. He calls himself D-list at best, and he's the most ill-prepared supervillain left alive.
And kind of tell us a little bit about the inspirations for the series.
It was the idea of a one villain versus a world of heroes that really was the idea. I just didn't know how to work it, and I decided it really needed to be fast. I wanted the story to go really quickly, which is why it ended up becoming Breakneck. That was kind of the pace that I wanted it to go at, and I think it worked in a certain aspect. It was my first ever published work, so it is a little raw, I think, compared to some stuff I've done since then. But I still love, I love reading it. There's some parts in there that still make me laugh. I mean, that was one of the main things with Breakneck was trying to make it funny. Despite all the things that are going on, I really, I thought it was funny. I used to laugh at it. So I always hope that readers would pick up on some of that stuff. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there if you're a fan of superhero comics. And I pick on a bunch of stuff and I play with a bunch of stuff, but I mean, I love superheroes, so I think it's all in good fun.
So it being your first published work and, going back to 2010, when you are collecting it, is there things in there that you kind of look at thinking that, I wish I had done that better or anything like that?
A little. I think that's true with most creators, though. When you look at your own stuff, you think, "Ugh," some stuff, makes my teeth hurt. You know what I mean, to read it. But for the most part, for my first real story out of the gate, I think it worked, because
Okay.
Breakneck originally was published, was a 3-issue miniseries published by a Philadelphia-based publisher called 215 Inc. And 215 Inc. actually turned into Invader Comics. And yeah, we published the first 3 issues, through Diamond. They were in comic book stores and everything, which was a trip to me to see my own comic in the store. And then we released a trade paperback that had a 4th issue. And this Zoop hardcover that we're trying to get going right now actually has the never before seen 5th issue.
So tell us about the artist who you worked with on this series.
His name was James Bolton. He did all the art for all 5 issues, and he's got the most unique style. I mean, if you read Breakneck, if you've ever seen any of the interior work, I mean, it doesn't look like anything else you see in a comic. Very European-ish, I think, but he has like his very own, very unique aesthetic. So one of the things I've been talking about while we, in working on this, is because it was so early on in my writing career, I just wrote it and handed it off to him and said, "Here you go." Whereas now, like I can tailor a script a little bit more to an artist's strengths, but I didn't really have that knowledge when I first wrote Breakneck. But James really took what I did and just cranked it up to 11. You know what I mean? Like, it was far beyond anything I expected, from my first comic.
And how did you guys originally get connected?
We connected through a website called Digital Webbing, which was a forum in the early 2000s. I actually don't know when it started, but I used to hang out there in the early 2000s and just talk about comics. And you could post up your artwork, you could post up your scripts for critiques and things like that. And I saw James's work there, and I reached out to him and just sort of gave him, a little bare bones idea of this story, and he liked it. And the rest was history. We started working on it fairly quickly after that, and it was published fairly quickly after that. So the story was called Breakneck, but we actually put it together at a pretty quick pace as well.
So while you were writing it, were there any other characters you maybe got attached to that you'd like to maybe explore, if given the possibility in the future?
I think so, yeah. So one of the things in this this hardcover that we're trying to put together, there's 2 short stories that take place in the world of Breakneck that don't necessarily have anything to do with the main storyline. They're just sort of standalone stories. So there is a lot of stuff. I think there's a lot of places we could explore in the Breakneck universe, and assuming if things go well with this campaign, we're running short on time, unfortunately, on the campaign. But there might be, maybe we can revisit the world of Breakneck. I do have some more scripts written for more issues, so maybe there's a possibility that we can explore more things in this universe.
And how did you get connected with Zoop as your platform for funding?
Well, I always loved the idea of Zoop, of like a crowdfunding platform strictly for comic books. I've done a couple of I've done some Kickstarters. I've been involved in some Kickstarters, and while I think it's a perfectly legitimate platform, I think the comics sometimes can get a little overshadowed just by there's just the sheer amount of stuff on Kickstarter, So the idea of a crowdfunding platform that's just for comic books was appealing to me. That was what I liked the best. And when I first started thinking about doing this, so when the Invader Comics guys weren't really interested in reprinting Breakneck, because they had kind of moved away from doing superhero stuff, which I totally get, right? I mean, superheroes are a hard sell if you're not Marvel or DC. So I asked, I said to them, could I do something on my own with this? And they were, yeah, more than happy to let me run with it. So, that's when I first started thinking like the crowdfund something, and Zoop was the right answer for me.
So, what would you say that are your strengths as a writer and, your weaknesses? And then what do you do to kind of play to your strengths and account for your weaknesses?
I'll start with my weakness. I feel like my biggest weakness as a comic book writer is that I'll come up with an idea that I think is great, and then I'll come up with an idea that I think is also great, and then I'll realize it's pretty much the same as the first idea. You know what I mean? Just with a slightly different take. And then I'll have to go back and rethink a lot of stuff based on that. So yeah, I kind of I maybe rehash ideas more than I should. But it's just something that I have to constantly work to avoid, ripping myself off. I guess in terms of strengths, I mean, I feel like I can write stuff that's pretty action-packed. I have a pretty good, clear vision of, action scenes and fight scenes and that type of thing. And I like to write stuff that's funny. I wrote a mini series called Bigfoot Frankenstein that came out a couple of years ago through Action Lab. And one of the first things that we did when we were working on that was have like a narration box that would break the fourth wall and talk to the reader. And that was a lot of fun because that was sort of like doing like an additional commentary on the comic as we created it. So I don't know. I think this stuff is funny. I hope the people reading it also think that.
And which writers, be they comic book or any other writers in any other genre, and kind of influence you and inspire you to when you're writing?
There's a few comic book writers that I take a lot of inspiration from. Guys like Brian Michael Bendis. His Daredevil run is a huge inspiration of mine. One of my favorite runs of any comic of all time. I love Mark Millar. He writes the best, like, big, dumb superhero stuff, and that's sort of where I feel some of my work sort of lands in that same kind of, just loud and, like an action movie on paper. But the guy that really influenced me the most was Garth Ennis. When Preacher first came out, I was in love with that comic, and I wanted to write, I wanted to write my own 60-issue Vertigo mini or maxi series, and it just really changed my thinking on comics, if that makes sense. Like before that, comics to me was Superman and Spider-Man. And then when I read this comic and it was really smart and adult and, funny and dark, like, it just really changed how I felt comics could be, how to read comics, how to approach comics. So yeah, those three guys, I think, there's probably lots of others, but those are the three guys that I always sort of come back to in terms of like my biggest inspiration.
And aside from working on your creator-owned stuff, if any of the major publishers came to you and said you can have any one of our properties that you can do whatever you want with, which one would you like to do the most?
Well, there's actually a couple. So for Marvel, I've always loved a character called the Prince of Orphans. He appeared in the Immortal Iron Fist. He was one of the other immortal weapons. And he just seemed like a really cool character that was very, sort of low key and underused. So I actually put a very short pitch together for the Prince of Orphans and had a few pages illustrated. So, you know, I'm ready to go if Marvel says yes. On the DC side, there's two characters. One of my all-time favorite characters is the Question, and so I would love to write a new Question series and have a very interesting supporting cast. And the other idea that I've always wanted to work on is the Midnighter. You know, he used to be in the Authority from Wildstorm. They've sort of incorporated him a little bit into the DC universe. But I always thought he would make a really good, you know, super powered agent of Batman. You know, like Batman's only superhuman operative. So I actually have a pretty good pitch written for that as well. So I'd love to work on something like that, especially because, you know, you're thinking of Mark Millar and his run on the Authority is one of my biggest inspirations, and one of the biggest inspirations on Breakneck as well.
So, if you had to, if you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
I think it would be, one, not to take myself too seriously, because I feel like maybe I did a little bit when I first started writing. You know, I wanted to be thought of as this real, like, you know, brainy writer, and I was not that at all. But also just to, you know, just to keep writing, just to keep working on stuff, right? You never know what's going to work. You know, it's, you know, throwing stuff at a wall and see what sticks. Just keep putting the pitches together, make the connections with other creators, other artists. And I actually think the very biggest thing that I never really did was spend more time on the convention circuit. You know what I mean? Like, to promote my work. You know, as I was starting to write comics, you know, I had 4 small kids at the time. So it wasn't, you know, traveling a lot, going to conventions wasn't really in the cards for me. I did a lot of local shows, but, you know, the big stuff, like, you know, I went to New York once. I've never been to San Diego, like any of these really big, you know, comic shows. So that might be something that I wish I'd done. And I know it's not too late, and I'm maybe getting to the point now where my kids are old enough that I can go now. They don't need me to stay with them. So, but yeah, conventions I think are a big deal, because, you know, that's where you meet the people that are actually reading your work.
So, is there anything else you wanted to mention about Breakneck that maybe we didn't cover, or you wanted to make sure that people knew about?
No, I mean, in terms of the Zoop campaign is to put together a hardcover collection of the 5 issues of Breakneck that exists. So, like I mentioned, there's a 5th issue that nobody's ever read, nobody's ever seen, and we're running really close to the end of the campaign. I think we're at about 4 days, and we have a lot to, you know, a pretty big hill to climb. You know, we're sitting just under $1,500 of, you know, 35. So I've been talking to the guys at Zoop about maybe doing some, you know, either extending it or making some changes to it. You know, but I mean, there's still a lot of cool stuff that you can get. You know, there's you can get copies of some of my other comics on there. If you're a retailer, there's a retailer bundle. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the Zoop, the hardcovers they put together, but such a great product that they do. You know, I have 2 or 3 hardcovers that I've gotten from Zoop from other crowdfunding campaigns, and that was why I wanted to do Breakneck with Zoop, because they just do such a great job with the production of their comics. You know, and I don't have a hardcover of any of my stuff. This was, you know, for more than anything, I wanted to have a copy of it for my own shelf. So. You know, I never say never. We're, you know, like I said, we're running short on time, but we might have to just pivot a little bit and try some new things here.
So, do you have anything else you'd like to promote at this time, or give one final pitch for the campaign itself?
Yeah, I mean, I just hope people check it out. You know, this was, you know, at the time, I mean, it still is a labor of love. It was something, you know, it was a story I loved. It was characters that I really loved, and, you know, I just really want people to read it. you know, more than anything else, I want people just to be able to check it out and connect with it. You know, we got some pretty good press when it first came out, but that was a long time ago. And I understand, I can't really ride on that, anything that happened back then. This is a brand new, it's more than 10 years later, and we're trying to put together a book that maybe not a lot of people have heard of, but I think people will dig it if they give it a chance. And I just hope people take a look at it and maybe get us closer to that goal before the end of the campaign.
And can people find your stuff on the internet or find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on. I mean, I use Facebook a lot because I'm old. But I mean, yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. So you can find me there. I don't know if you can see. There's my name there. So, yeah, just look me up. You can find me there. You can find links to the campaign. Links to interviews, all kinds of stuff. Little sneak peeks of work, the stuff I'm working on now, and yeah, just check me out. And let's see if we can get Breakneck to where it needs to be.
Sounds good. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to chat, and I'll do a quick turnaround on this video and get it out so it can be, hopefully help out the last couple of days of the campaign.
Yeah. No, and I really appreciate it, Chad. I appreciate you taking the time, and anything we can do to promote the book would be fantastic.
And before we go, are you currently reading anything that you would want to recommend, be it comics or books in general?
Well, it's interesting because I was talking about Brian Michael Bendis, so I'm actually in the process of collecting and reading through all of his Avengers work. So I started with the new Avengers, I started with the Avengers, the whole disassembled arc, and then on to the new Avengers and the Mighty Avengers. Like I'm slowly putting that full run together. So that's been a lot of fun. Some great comics too.
All right. Well, like I said, thank you for taking the time this evening, and sorry we couldn't schedule this sooner. Maybe next time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Chad. Thanks very much.
And you're, welcome back anytime you have anything else you'd like to talk about. And yeah, well, I mean, we've been, promoting the campaign over on Comic Watch in our weekend crowdfunding roundup. So
yes, I have seen that. That's great. Yeah.
We'd like to, help indie creators, and Zoop is such a great platform, and Jordan is such a, his, putting the site together and stuff. So, it's nice, like you said, it's nice to see a place kind of just dedicated to comics.
For sure, yeah. The Zoop guys are great. Everything they've done is, you can tell they love comics and they're just really passionate about, trying to help creators create more comics.
All right. Well, again, have a great night, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Chad.
Good.